Well, a couple of weeks ago, a clip from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has joined the others on the Nintendo console gaming Facebook page. And this clip shows us a couple of interesting things, albeit yes, there was nothing groundbreaking or new about this footage. We see Link do some cooking, and then he cuts down a tree, and in between, we can see the Woodcutter's house. And I've actually come up with a pretty good theory about why it's there for.
Let's hear it then.
Wait, who are you? How did you get onto my channel?
I'm Zeltik. You know, you asked me to be here.
Oh, right, yes, sorry.
No worries, let's hear the theory.
No, Zeltik, before I lay out the theory, and since you're here, why don't we describe what we've seen about the house so far?
Sure. Well, first off, we see the house from the outside. There's a few things we can see. Firstly, the actual structure of the building is that of a simple cabin with a basic log roof.
Well, we can probably assume that these are the trees from around the house, or just as likely from the trees that were actually in the final building place of the house.
The bottom half of the hut is made out of stones. These were tessellated together to create the actual bottom of the walls, and the base that can support the logs above.
I personally love the little lantern placed outside in the small alcove area, which is something presumably used to allow the woodcutter entry into his house at night.
There's also a larger rock on the side of the building, with a rushroom growing, which is interesting, though even from the inside this section just looks like there's a large stone, nothing massively interesting. Also, I didn't really see a door to the house.
I guess the owner must not really care about dembo goblins.
Also, the ceiling is created using some kind of fabric. In the new short clip, we saw nothing about it, but in some of the Nintendo Treehouse footage, we can see just how strong this fabric is.
That's true. Link is able to run along it without causing any damage or issues. We also can see as well that the logs are being held together by ropes.
Interestingly, I could notice a lot of similarities to the style of houses built in medieval Europe.
You British people in your fancy historic houses.
Yeah, alright. But this is quite an interesting stylistic choice, considering the game's focus on technology to include such a blatantly medieval house. Nice how they're keeping the series' roots in this era, and not completely throwing it out the window.
Also, there's a Korok on the roof. Just saying.
We also see a few other items scattered around outside, including a large pitchfork leaning against the wall of the house, a torch, and a lid for the cooking pot. Oh yeah, there's also a cooking pot outside, which the new footage shows Link cooking 5 mushrooms to create an enduring mushroom skewer, which heals many hearts at once and temporarily increases the size of the stamina gauge. Anyway, the only other important thing which the outside had is actually only kind of related to the house itself.
We actually see a lot of the landscape around the house, and the two biggest things I can see are both pretty close. The Temple of Time and the Resurrection Tower.
It's interesting that the house is so close to such major landmarks, and on a cliff next to it, one of the plateau's 4 shrines is right there.
Anyway, to the inside of the house.
It's fairly standard, there's actually quite a few things inside it, though it's obvious that it's currently set up with the intention of one person living there. Though there's also a lot of spare space, and also straw and fabric on the floor, it could definitely sleep a few more people.
It has a single bed in the corner, as well as a table in the center of the room, and another smaller, almost bar-like table to the side. And there's that large rock I mentioned earlier.
This is definitely a room which feels hardly lived in, except for perhaps sleeping. However, it had to have been built for a reason.
And I also have a strong feeling that this house was built after the calamity, though I'll get to that very soon.
Does that mean?
Yes, now I am going to get into my theory. First off, I want to try and establish who the woodcutter is.
That could help.
Without knowing the exact timeline placement of the game, we can't, at this point, assume that the woodcutter is any of the characters who we've met before.
Well, there is one.
Breath of the Wild has only shown us a few characters so far, and ignoring the Sheikah monks, there's only one non-Link person on the Great Plateau.
The old man.
That's correct. I believe that the old man is the woodcutter who owns this hut. It's not really surprising.
Oh, in the trailer we see this old man cutting down a tree. That seems pretty woodcutterish to me.
The house looks hardly lived in, and the old man seems to spend a lot of his time around the Shrine of Resurrection. Why?
Well, that's an easy one. He was waiting for a certain hero to wake up.
That's right. Link is such an edgy hero, he doesn't even set his alarm clock, and he won't even wake up in time for breakfast.
Let me guess. Now you're gonna have some crazy theory about how the old man didn't build the house for himself.
As you said. So now I'm going to go off on an educational tangent about the real world. I don't know if any of you viewers have done a lot of long hikes, but in some popular hiking areas, such as the one I'll mainly be using as a reference point, Mount Kosciuszko in Australia, there are some relics left over from times now past.
Oh, you mean like a survival hut?
Exactly. The purpose of a survival hut is fairly self-intuitive. It's a hut created for the purpose of helping other hikers have a place to sleep overnight in an emergency.
Usually these huts are stocked up with a small amount of food, as well as some firewood and usually somewhere to light a fire.
Bang on. Now, I mentioned Mount Kosciuszko, and that's because it is the location of a survival hut I've actually entered. Of course, I didn't stay there overnight in the hut, but it was really interesting. A few years ago, my father and I went to stay in the Snowy Mountains area, and we took the hike up Mount Kosciuszko, and that was the survival hut I entered. In fact, I might even edit in some footage I took outside, with my dad in front of the hut, the Seaman's hut.
Seaman's hut. Classic.
Okay, fine, yes, very funny, Zeltik. It was created by W.H. Seaman in 1928 in memory of his son, who died in the same location after freezing to death in the snow. The hut was built with the complete intention of preventing similar deaths like this. The hut is upkept and stocked by hikers as a whole, and the hut is quite useful.
I'm guessing that with cars and planes as well as mobile phones and portable emergency radios, the hut may not be quite as necessary or as useful anymore as it was in 1928, but even so, as an actual piece of history it's pretty cool.
True, but the thing is, the woodcutter's hut seems to remind me greatly of these survival huts, such as the Seaman's hut.
I can see what you mean. Like the small selection of food left in the hut, despite us already seeing that the old man has no troubles with cooking apples closer to the Shrine of Resurrection. And there's also a cooking pot over a small fire pit outside, so that any people who are in danger can have somewhere warm to sit and cook a nice warm meal.
One of the other big pieces of evidence which convinces me that the house, at least to some degree, is set up as a rescue hut is the overabundance of lamps. Outside the house, we see both a very large flaming lantern built into a section of the structure which appears to have been created expressly for the lamp. Also, it's a bit smaller and harder to notice, but there's actually also a smaller lantern just at the door.
Oh, you're right. Those two lanterns make a lot of sense in the concept of a rescue hut. The large, oversized one is to show travellers the house, and the smaller one shows them the doorway inside.
Finally, in a similar sense to the Seaman's hut, the house's name only partially comes from the owner. Woodcutter doesn't just refer to the owner, but also the builder.
But there's no one else in the Great Plateau that we've seen, so who could he have built this hut as a survival for?
Well, that's an easy one. 100 years ago, after barely surviving the calamity, the young man had one major fear beyond the calamity itself. Would he still be around in 100 years? Would he be there to guide Link when he awoke? This was his fear, and if I'm correct, then the young man built the house not for himself but for Link.
That's the reason it's so close to many of the major landmarks, including one of the shrines, and the lanterns, they were to guide Link to the hut.
Though we wouldn't have known it, if the now old man had not made it through those 100 years, perhaps an axe and some food would have not been the only thing in the house, but Link would have also found some instructions, and probably a paraglider. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. I am super stoked to actually have Zeltik here on my channel, and I'm assuming that most of you probably already know who he is, but if not, I question your sanity. But Zeltik, explain yourself to these people.
I make a lot of analytical content, mostly on Breath of the Wild, but also on the Zelda series as a whole. I make analyses, theories, and will eventually upload gameplay, highlights, and more. Basically, if you're a fan of Zelda, I'm sure there'll be something on my channel you'll like.
Thanks for that, and once again, thanks so much for coming onto my channel. Anyway, to the viewers, what do you think? Did the old man build the house for Link? Also, consider checking out some of my other Breath of the Wild videos, and maybe give this video a like or a share, and don't forget to subscribe to me for some more video game music themed videos from The Gamer Musician.
You triggered my trap card!